guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Homeowner Association sued me for $100,000 over my illegal garden. I destroyed them in court. I'm a simple woman who lives a quiet life with my husband, 2 cats and my favorite place on earth, my garden. I've lived in my home for 16 years. It's on a nice street with mature houses that are governed by a terrible homeowner association. A homeowner association that decided they would harass me for the last 2 years, sending me terrible letters and fines, stating that it's contrary to their design scheme of the neighborhood and that the wildlife it attracts is a nuisance to those around me. So many stupid things were said about such a peaceful and beautiful place, that is until I decided to do something about it. My father passed away and he had always been an avid gardener, so in my state of grief and sadness I started building my own place of serenity, my garden. It is my therapy. It brings me happiness and peace, and watching all of the butterflies and hummingbirds is a joy to me. About 2 years ago we began receiving letters from the Homeowner Association. Like I mentioned before, we've been here for 16 years and had no issues. Not a single letter. All of a sudden, my garden is a problem. First it started with some cute signs I had up saying birds welcome and butterfly garden that my granddaughter made me. I also had a small statue, no bigger than 1.5 feet tall. It was an angel praying that was given to me at my father's funeral by a family friend. I felt like it looked after my garden and that Dad was with me. According to the Homeowner Association, it's some kind of unacceptable lawn decoration, and so were my signs. My yard is large and has tall, mature trees as well as a large portion in the front that is a well-mulched area with different native wildflowers and other plants that are good for the nature around me. I added ferns, violets and other low-maintenance plants in my backyard that would help reduce the pollutants with the runoff from my neighbor's property. But I was instead forced to turn that back into turf grass last year after I caved and couldn't handle the letters and fines that were adding up. My husband was getting sick of it too and just wanted them to leave us alone. I continued to receive more and more letters, one stating that my pollinator garden went against their aesthetic vision of how the neighborhood and gardens should look like, going as far as to say that it is an eyesore that no one wants to look at. Multiple letters said that there was a neighbor that was complaining and saying that it was bringing wild animals onto his property like squirrels and chipmunks. He also said that my garden attracted mosquitoes, bees, butterflies and other pests to his yard. After so long of this, it started to feel like bullying. My daughter works for an environmental engineering company and is a huge advocate of wildlife and environmentally friendly areas and habitats. With all of the negativity in the world today, I had such a hard time understanding why I was being harassed over a garden. Fast forward to 2 years later, I'm absolutely beyond sick of the issues with my homeowner association. My daughter had pushed me to finally do something about all of their harassment, so I started pursuing a lawyer. I don't even care about money really, I just want to be able to have my garden in peace. I don't want to sell the house, that's what several of my friends and family suggested. We've paid it off and have great memories there and I love the area so much. I just wish the homeowner association would leave me alone. It takes me almost a week to find someone that would be willing to even accept a case like mine. I had several attorneys tell me that I was trying to take on an unwinnable case. I trudge on, my head hanging after the 10 lawyers have called and been laughed at. I almost gave up but decided to give the last one on my list a shot. And it worked. 2 gentlemen, a father and son, named Kyle and Richard Togg decided that they would take my case on. We put together a lot of information, really it was like a presentation. I needed to have great reasons and explanations why my garden should be allowed, how it's environmentally important, nor is it actually hurting anyone. I basically needed to prove that their side was so unfounded and silly that I could pull it off. I saw why the other attorneys would not take on my case, because it seems strange and like something that is impossible to support. That the homeowner association should have the final say in the appearance of my yard. That is what I signed up for when I decided to join a homeowner association community. Kyle and Richard were so supportive of me, my husband and daughter. Richard apparently has a garden in his yard, one more for vegetables, but it is a passion of his. He even asked if he could come by and see ours. When he did, he said he felt moved. The nature that was living in it was beautiful and a gift. There isn't enough wildlife in the cities, nor are there enough flowers or other plant life and foliage for our bees and butterflies. It was a few weeks after starting the ball rolling before we actually had our day in court. I was prepared. I was ready. This could be a disaster, but it has to be done, I told myself. Once we got into the courtroom, I could hear the Homeowner Association Board's lawyer telling some of them that this was a breeze and something about they were going to sue us for their lawyer fees. They weren't exactly trying to be quiet, and their arrogance was enough to make my husband fume. As a sweet and gentle man, he rarely gets that way, but he was so upset that day listening to them. As we were trying to tell our side of things, it felt like the opposing lawyer and the Homeowner Association Board were almost mocking us. One woman was fake yawning as I was explaining why some of the wildflowers and weeds were beneficial for the environment. When we started to discuss the animals that were attracted, such as squirrels or chipmunks, their lawyer interjected, saying that they were wild animals that wouldn't be there if it weren't for the garden. The judge didn't appreciate the interruption and warned him though. That gave me some validation that the judge wasn't there to ignore me as well, and I became more hopeful and confident. When it came to their turn, well, let's just say their statements were bizarre. They even had my super weird neighbor that started all the complaints there to give his part, saying that I had giant, man-sized butterflies and millions of mosquitoes terrorizing him and his property. I couldn't even get over it. Some of the stuff he was saying sounded preposterous, and the judge was quick to have him sit down. The lawyer laid into me, asking me questions that honestly were just a reach. Almost as if his only tactic was to try and startle me into some kind of sad submission or belittle me and make it sound as if I have some weed-ridden yard that brings nothing but terrible creatures no one has ever wanted to see or deal with. Thankfully, the judge was on our side and felt like their harassment was truly subject to money and that I was owed plenty. She quickly dismissed their request for me to pay their lawyer fees, which they said was almost $100,000. Instead, she awarded me and my husband the same amount in harassment and for them to reimburse us for the money we had to give them in fines. That was a glorious day. We were all so happy. I am even in the process of trying to change laws in our state regarding homeowner associations and their stipulations over our yards. Pollinator gardens should be allowed anywhere, in any neighborhood. No matter what the stupid homeowner association has to say. After all, the earth will be here for a long time after us. So, their opinions of my butterflies and angel statue are at this point, a thing of the past. The next story is titled, "Crazy Lady Lit My Buddy's Land on Fire, so he burned down her world." Buckle up, this one's long. I was visiting a friend who owns and operates a trailer park. Basically his house is the main office. A couple had just moved into a lot with their mobile home. The dude seemed fine, and him and his girlfriend had just had their first kid. Well, at 3 a.m. just a few hours after I arrived, the boyfriend showed up at my friend's house, the main office. Apparently, he had a DNA test done, and he found out the kid wasn't his. So, while the girlfriend was still in the hospital, he started ducking around on her to get back at her. Well, earlier that day, she got released from the hospital, and he refused to go pick her up. So, she walked from the hospital to the trailer park, easily 20 miles, and found him ducking this girl. She went apeshit. She started trashing their tiny mobile home while he and his mistress quickly got their clothes on, and the boyfriend opted to drive the mistress back to her place. When he got back, his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend locked him out of their mobile home. So, at 3 a.m. he showed up at the front office to call the police. My buddy woke me up, filled me in on the situation, and I went out to his living room to keep the dude company. I explained that if the kid isn't his and he signed the birth certificate, he has 60 days to remove himself from the birth certificate, otherwise he'll be on the hook for child support. I also explained that while calling the cops is a good idea, they likely won't be able to remove her from the mobile home since she had established residency. Well, the cops showed up, knocked on the door, she answered, and the cops just did a welfare check on the kid. They left, and he was allowed back into the mobile home by his soon-to-be ex. It would have been nice if that were the end. Nope. Not even close. Not even 30 minutes after the cops left, the dude came back up to the main office, and said he needed to call the cops again. She stole his car. From what he said, she even tried to run him over before she sped off into the night. Before the cops could get back to the park, she came back, and she started doing donuts in my buddy's yard. She ran over his garden, and just ducked up his yard, in general. She finally stopped about a minute before the police arrived. The cops got out of their cruisers and arrested this chick on the spot. The charge? Misdemeanor malicious mischief. They charged her for ruining my buddy's garden, and that was it. A day passed, and Crazy Lady got released on bond. She came back to their mobile home, and got right back into it with her soon-to-be ex. During the fight, she started scratching at her throat until she had left a lasting mark. She called the cops, claimed he laid hands on her, and the cops came and arrested him for domestic violence. The cops took the kid and placed him in protective custody. As an aside, I know that she fabricated the "he beat me" story, because she bragged about it after the cops left. She even went so far as to call the dude's parents and brag about getting their son locked up. Now, my buddy is freaking out. He's got a crazy lady on his property, Crazy Lady has no income, and she just had their only source of income locked up and subsequently fired for being locked up. There's no way in hell they're going to pay rent anytime soon. He wants her gone, but legally, he has no recourse because they aren't past due on rent. Another day passed, Homie was still locked up, and Crazy Lady had started throwing all of their belongings into the yard of their lot and partially onto my buddy's property. My buddy told her she needed to clean up her yard by 6 p.m., or he would write up a violation. She ignored him. An hour or so after that, I was helping my buddy move some stacks of bricks in his backyard, which was right next to the lot her boyfriend had rented, and the entire time she was just talking to herself. She wasn't talking to herself in a normal way. No. She was yelling random shit like minimum wage, and they fired me, $10.75 an hour and they fired me, $35K a year and they fired me. Mother duckers. Or I just want to enjoy my life in peace, but they won't let me. I'll kill them. We decided it would be best not to acknowledge her at all. We stopped working and went back inside for some lunch. Then we saw the smoke. This crazy witch was piling up her own shit, and lit the pile on fire, on my buddy's property, not even on her own lot. My buddy called the cops, who arrived in record time along with the fire department. They arrived to find her with a lighter and a can of gasoline in her hands. She had the water running, and she tried to go turn it off, but the cops stopped her. My buddy opted to turn the water off for her, so he went and turned the water off to her mobile home. She screamed her head off at my buddy for doing that, despite the cops telling him to go ahead and do it. The fire department put out the fire, and the cops put handcuffs on her and stuffed her into their cruiser. I thought to myself, finally, this crazy witch is getting put away for arson. Nope. The fire marshal refused to come investigate, so it couldn't be classified as arson. The cops wrote her a citation and released her. My buddy told the cops he wanted to press charges for trespassing, as she had started the fire on his property. The cops advised that they couldn't because they would need to show intent. She needed to know she was trespassing, in other words. Since there wasn't a clear marker indicating that she was, the cops couldn't arrest her for it. So, my buddy told the cops where his property started, and asked if the cop would explain that to her so that when she inevitably does trespass again, they will be able to arrest her. The cop agreed. He explained where her property ended, and that she was under no circumstances to step foot on my buddy's land. As the cops were leaving, she looked at me and my buddy, and said, "You're lucky I don't bash your heads in with my baseball bat." Followed quickly by "I'm going to blow your ducking heads off, mother duckers." The cops had their windows rolled down, but they did nothing. They just left. An hour passed, and we see crazy bitch standing in the middle of the street, stopping every car that passed. Finally, one of them pulled into the park, parked on my buddy's property, and let her use their cell to call the cops. Why was she calling the cops? She tried to get them to come arrest my buddy for turning her water off for her, on police orders. Since she was standing on my buddy's property to call the cops, he whipped out his phone, and recorded her standing on his property. Then he called the cops himself. When the cops came, she was certainly surprised when they put her in handcuffs immediately. The cop who had responded before, the one who explained to her where her land ended, came over, watched the video my buddy recorded on his cell, and then he explained that he would not be arresting her for trespassing. He was going to do an emergency order of detention. Basically, she was going to be forcibly taken to the closest hospital where she would be evaluated briefly and then released. He explained that she would be back out before the day was done. My buddy didn't bother insisting that he wanted to press charges for trespassing. I wondered why, but after the cops left, he called her ex-boyfriend's parents who, as luck would have it, had the only key to the mobile home. It was given to them by the police as it was on their son when he was arrested for domestic violence. They came out, and they locked up the RV. My buddy then noticed a water leak coming from the valve. So, he turned off the water to the entire park, briefly, cut off the section of pipe attached to the valve, and capped it off to stop the leak. Lastly, remember how he warned the crazy lady to clean up her yard or she would get a violation? Well, she never cleaned up her yard. Instead, she threw just about everything that was in the RV into the yard. Well, as it's written in the rental agreement, my buddy cleaned her yard. He took everything that was out in the yard, TV, mattress, microwave, etc. and he hauled it off to the dump. Then he wrote out a violation as well as a bill for having to clean her yard. Well, crazy lady got out a few hours after she was taken in, and she called her ex-boyfriend's parents to try getting a ride. They promptly hung up on her, and they immediately called us. We had plans to grill out for dinner, and my buddy invited them over for dinner and a show. She arrived after the sun had set, and well after we had eaten dinner. We were sitting out on my buddy's patio, which had a very clear view of the mobile home. When the crazy lady saw us, she let us know how she really felt. She called us every name in the book. She hadn't gotten to the mobile home yet, and because it was dark, she couldn't even see that her yard had been cleaned. We sat there and took every name she could dish out, and we collectively laughed as we all knew what was about to happen. After she realized we were laughing at her, she hit us with a final, "Duck you," before storming off to the mobile home. As she got closer, she could see that her yard was barren. When she got to the door, she could see the notice attached. When she went to turn the door handle, it wouldn't budge. After a few moments of silence, it finally clicked in her head. She screamed out into the night, "Mother duckers." She must have been thirsty after her long walk because she went to the water hose, only to find that it wasn't on. Then she went to turn on the water, only to find that it had been capped off, no valve in sight. My buddy yelled out to her, "Sorry, there was a water leak at the valve, it was park property, so I capped it off. I'll have it repaired within the next 2 weeks though." Coincidentally, 2 weeks was the earliest time he could start the eviction process. Thanks for listening.